In a world where freedom was just a dream and justice a distant hope, one man dared to challenge the chains that bound a nation. This story is based on true events, the life of Levi Coffin, a humble Quaker merchant whose courage turned his home into a sanctuary for those escaping the horrors of slavery. Known today as the father of the Underground Railroad, Levi's quiet defiance helped thousands of men, women, and children find their way to freedom long before the Civil War began. Written and narrated by Veil of History, this story isn't just about one man. It is about the power of compassion in the face of cruelty, faith against fear, and how one act of courage can change the course of history forever. So sit back, listen closely, and journey with us into the hidden world of candlelight whispers, coded songs, and secret roads, where one man's home became the heartbeat of freedom itself. They called him the father of the Underground Railroad, but his real story began long before freedom had a name, in the quiet whispers of a man who refused to bow to the cruelty of a system built on chains. Long before Harriet Tubman became a legend, before the secret tunnels and coded songs, there was one man who chose to fight an empire with nothing but his faith, courage, and an unbreakable belief that all men and women were born free. His name was Levi Coffin. The year was 1826, and America was split in two, not by borders, but by the color of skin. The South thrived on the back-breaking labor of enslaved people, while the North claimed morality, but often looked away. But in the small town of Newport, Indiana, a simple Quaker merchant dared to make his home a beacon in the darkness. Levi Coffin and his wife, Catherine, lived an ordinary life on the outside, running a dry goods store, smiling at their neighbors, attending church on Sundays. But behind closed doors, their house was anything but ordinary. It was a secret station on a journey that had no maps, no guarantees, and no mercy for those who were caught. Every night when the world fell asleep, desperate footsteps would approach their door. Men and women, sometimes barefoot, sometimes carrying infants, running from the hellish fields of the South, guided only by the North Star and the hope of survival. Levi never asked for names, never asked for payment. All he asked was silence and courage. "You're safe now," he would whisper, as he opened the hidden door that led to the cellar where fugitives would hide until the next part of their journey. But freedom had a price. The fugitive slave law made it illegal to help an enslaved person escape. Anyone caught could lose everything: their home, their fortune, even their life. Yet Levi refused to stop. His home became known as the Grand Central Station of the Underground Railroad, sheltering over 3,000 souls. He created networks that stretched across states: farmers, merchants, preachers, and ordinary citizens, all bound by one silent mission: deliver freedom, one life at a time. In one chilling night, as the winter wind howled against the wooden walls, a knock came that nearly froze his blood. It was the sheriff demanding to search his house for runaways. Inside, hidden behind the false wall of his pantry, 7 men huddled in terror, their hearts pounding so loud Levi could almost hear them. With unflinching calm, he welcomed the sheriff in, offered him tea, and prayed under his breath. The man searched the entire house, opening every door, every chest, until finally leaving in frustration. Only after the sound of hooves disappeared into the night did Levi open the hidden passage and whisper, "God has spared you tonight." Word spread quickly. Slave catchers from Kentucky and Tennessee began to mark him as an enemy. He was called a criminal, a traitor, even the most dangerous man in America. But to those who passed through his home, he was a savior. Many remembered the smell of his wife's bread, the flicker of candlelight, and the soft sound of a hymn being sung as they finally rested their weary bodies for the first time in years. Levi Coffin wasn't rich in gold, but he was rich in spirit. and his courage inspired others to join. Secret codes began to spread. The friend of friends meant safe haven. The parcel will be delivered meant another soul had made it north. It was a symphony of resistance, and Levi was its conductor. The Underground Railroad wasn't tea made of rails or steam. It was made of people who risked everything for those who had nothing. As the years passed, the danger grew. Rewards for captured runaways increased, and slave catchers became more brutal. One night, a young girl, barely 16, arrived at Levi's door, her back scarred from the whip, her clothes in tatters. She had escaped alone, traveling for days through forests, hiding by day and walking by moonlight. Levi and Catherine tended to her wounds, fed her, and gave her a name for the first time: Hope. When she finally crossed the Ohio River into freedom, she turned back and said, "Tell them the Lord still walks with the weak." Levi would remember her words forever. By the time the Civil War began, the Underground Railroad had become a symbol of America's conscience, a living, breathing protest against injustice. And though Levi Coffin never fired a gun, his weapon was far greater: compassion that defied the law. His store became a center for anti-slavery meetings. His money funded the escape of hundreds more. And when freedom finally came with the Emancipation Proclamation in 1863, Levi stood quietly in his doorway, tears in his eyes, knowing the fight had been worth every risk. But even then, he didn't stop. He helped newly freed families find work, shelter, and dignity. Because freedom without survival was just another form of struggle. Many called him a saint, but Levi saw himself as nothing more than a servant of justice. He once said, "The true test of faith is not what we say in church, but what we do when we see suffering." In the years that followed, his house became a monument, not of stone, but of memory. Generations would pass, and the world would forget his name, but his spirit lived on in every act of defiance against oppression, in every hand that reached out to help the powerless. Levi Coffin never sought fame, but history could not forget him. His home in Indiana still stands today, silent, humble, and holy, a testament to a man who turned compassion into rebellion and rebellion into freedom. And maybe that's what makes his story so powerful. Because the Underground Railroad wasn't just about escaping slavery. It was about redefining humanity itself. It was about one man standing against an empire and saying, "No, not in my house." When you walk through his home today, you can still feel the echoes, the whispers of children hiding under floorboards, the creak of the wooden stairs as Levi carried food to the attic, the faint warmth of candlelight where a mother once prayed for her son's life. Every brick, every nail, every shadow carries the weight of those who passed through it. In a time when silence was safety, Levi Coffin chose to speak through action. In a world built on fear, he chose faith. And in a nation divided by hate, he chose love. He didn't just open his door, he opened a path that changed history forever. So when we talk about freedom, about courage, about the people who stood tall when the world knelt to injustice, remember the man who lit the first torch in the darkness. Remember the father of the Underground Railroad, Levi Coffin, the man who proved that one home, one heart, and one unshakable belief in humanity could defy an entire system of oppression. And even now, if you listen closely to the winds that sweep through Indiana's old roads, you might still hear his voice, calm, steady, and unwavering, whispering to every generation that follows. Do what is right, even when the world tells you it's wrong. Because freedom isn't given, it's earned by those brave enough to fight for it, and by those compassionate enough to share it.